Hello and welcome to Thursday's edition of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host on this occasion, Tony Anderson, and it's a lower league podcast, so you won't be hearing much from me over the course of that. But who am I with? Is it Craig G Telfer? Is it Shaughan McGuigan? It's Shaughan McGuigan, everyone. Hi, Shaughan.
Hello there, you all right?
I'm very well, mate. I'm very well. How are you, more to the point?
I'm also very well, thank you. I'm interested. So, see when you started recording there, a bright light came on. Is that because I know you were saying a kind of halo light thing?
Oh,
Is
okay.
that so?
Okay.
Did that
You're
come on when
outing
you
me.
start recording?
You're outing me now. Okay.
I don't think it was a bad thing. I just mean, like, did that come on when you? Because you look
No,
great.
that's already been on from when
All
we
right,
were
okay.
talking before this. What are they called again?
I don't know, a halo light.
That's what it looks like, but they've got a name for glow, something glow, and it's what influencers use. I was
Well,
talking about the last.
no wonder you have one.
Yeah, of course. Because last I done a pod with Rob, and I was talking about the last time that I could use it for other things. Mainly, it was me doing things topless. Was what Rob was Rob was pushing for. He said basically, no matter what I do, I was saying just like rate takeaways, just get them sent run, put it on. Me topless eating different takeaways, and I give them a rating out of 5. I don't know how many people would watch that.
But
We can
how
find
handy
out.
has it been so far? Like, I don't have one.
Well, what's been good is Fowler sent me the webcam to make it
Uh-huh.
all better, and Mandy, because I can't do anything basically, she figured out how to. It came with some bits so you could attach it to the ring light. That's what it's called, ring light.
Ring light, that's it.
So now I've got all set up because that's what I really didn't want to get. I was going to build a shelf to put the webcam on because I didn't want to have to set up and make it so it would face me correctly every time. So
Uh-huh.
now I've got this with this ring light, so it's behind the laptop and it's attached at the right sort of level so you can see my face. And then the ring light has a slight glow. You can do different glows. You can make it brighter. Oh,
Right,
what's
okay.
that?
Yeah,
Oh
that's brighter.
God.
Uh-huh. What
God,
else have we got?
that's not great. And then you can change it. So it's like
Oh, blue.
blue. You can do
Uh-huh.
all sorts. So
Wow.
basically everyone knows now that I'm just a lie. People are probably thinking, Tony's skin's improved over the last weeks. But don't worry, it's not. I still look pale and tired due to being a redhead. So don't worry about that. That's all remaining the same. It's just I done this just so you could see me properly. No point in doing all the webcam. My light in my room doesn't really do it that well over me. And Phil was saying I was too dark. So I was just going to get a lamp. But then people stepped in and said, no, what to do? Get a ring light. And here we are. This is the big leagues for the Terrace podcast. Ring lights, webcams.
Now that I realise you can turn it blue, I might ask for it. Didn't realise you could do all of those. I just thought it was a light.
No. You can change it, as I said.
Doesn't sound that good. All these different aspects.
I can make it. Oh God, I've been at Tenerife for a week. Oh no, I've no. Oh, you can do anything. What a
Wow.
world it opens up. But yeah, we've no Telfer today. I've stepped in. Telfer's being worked so hard by that TV show. He always has to turn up every single week and host a View for the Terrace. So he needs a wee rest now and again. And to be fair to him, he bloody deserves it because I know how much work he puts into all that. And I'm sure that comes across on the telly. And that'll be the last time I'm nice about Telfer on air for around 3 to 4 months. Okay,
Quarterly.
but
You'll have quarterly compliments when it comes
yeah,
to
I think
G
that's
Telfer.
fair. I think that's fair. But as you come to expect, it's me and Shaughan, and you know what happens when the Elliot Rodger and and Alex Minisian of the Terrace podcast get together.
Who are these people, Tony?
Right, so this is going down the incel route, and these guys one's a copycat killer of not copycat, he was inspired to murder off this guy. So Elliot Rodger is sort of like went on a killing spree, killed 6 people and wounded more than a dozen.
I
in
don't
the
know why I'm
town
laughing.
of
That's no funny.
Isla Vista before he committed suicide.
Oh.
But he was all about incels. So they're a fringe group of sexually frustrated men who blame women for their misery and often advocate for violence against them, unfortunately. But he was so inspired by Alex Minison, who's a 25-year-old man accused of ploughing a van onto a crowded Toronto sidewalk on Monday, which wasn't good. This was in 2017, I think. But I thought this is good because I don't know much about the lower league, Shaughan. And I thought, I'm inspired by you. I'm just going to be copying you as we
and I'm
go
an
through
incel.
this. And you're an incel. So I thought this would it would all fold up. But when I was reading through this, man, it just the former military recruit wrote a Facebook post referencing Roger and so-called Chads and Stacey's, which I didn't know were internet slang for men and women with more active sex lives. I didn't know that at all. And they just seem really angry about women. They just think that to Dan is a glorified, he's among these people. They praise him for he's a patron saint of incels, apparently.
See if people can't get girlfriends or don't know how to talk to women or whatever. You don't need to blame women for those feelings. Just do what most other people do and watch Star Trek.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Just get another hobby.
Yeah. You can always wank it out. I mean, that's always there. That's always a given.
I mean, I went for the clean option of watching sci-fi.
You need to do both. You need to do both. You would have the clean, regularly watching Star Trek, but then a 2-minute spell to stop the anger for women getting out of the way.
And listen, when you've seen what Deanna Troi wore from season 2 of Star Trek: Next Generation onwards, my goodness.
Well, how could they be helped? But to finish it off, you're saying, like, why don't they do this? Well, this person, a user wrote that Monday's rampage was caused by women's rights and the refusal of women to have sex with incels. And he claims all violence, random attacks, and terrorism are done by men who can't find girlfriends. And thus women are directly responsible for all of it. The user wrote, the only way to fix this problem is to take away women's rights and adopt a system of equal redistribution of women. And I would love to see how that would be policed and how they would do it. So that would just be like people just turning up and going, I'll have that one. Or do you just sit in your house, the bell goes like Amazon, here's a girlfriend for you. They're delighted to be here. And then you crack on. So I don't know, it's an interesting mindset. It's an interesting policy decision we could have.
Very much sounds like somebody who doesn't want to take accountabilities for their own problems.
yeah, very much. No. It's all women's. If any sort of murder or terrorist attack is purely based on women turning men down. So hope they can live for themselves.
Just watch Star Trek for the love of goodness.
for crying out loud. Just watch Star Trek. But Shaughan, we're not here to talk about incels, are we? I mean, have you anything to report? Have you any fun stories? You had a good week at work?
Do you know something? It's not that I've had a good week at work, but I'm glad to be here. Like last Thursday, I was supposed to be doing a podcast and it was literally impossible to get out of Edinburgh and back to Fife. So I'm just glad that I am able to do this, I suppose.
So how did that happen? I mean, I felt sorry for enough, and I was nearly messaging to offer you salvation of my house, but I was like, I don't think you want to do that. I'll just get home even later than waiting on. Just when I saw the writing of there is 500 people in front of me at the bus station. And like when you picture that scene, you just can't help but feel sorry for a friend. But I was like, surely there's lots of buses going off. So how long did you have to wait at said bus station?
I eventually got back at about the back in 9. But no, it was an unpleasant Thursday evening, especially when I thought I had a podcast to look forward to, but wasn't the case. I had like about a million words of notes, and they all went
it was about the top flight you were going to be doing, eh?
The top flight.
Sorry, don't be silly.
Tony, don't be ridiculous. No. What on earth could I discuss about top? No, it's myself.
A lot
and Andy
more than I'm going to be able to
about...
add to this, Shaughan.
Myself and Andy Harrow were going to talk about the championship, but that couldn't go ahead.
Well, let's talk about the championship right now, okay. Shaughan. I know we were talking about, we're just going to have a few storylines from each league. So we're going to start at the top. We'll do the bottom. it's going to be a whistle-stop tour of the top and bottom of all three divisions. So, I mean, we're going to the top of your lads, where your lads are slugging it out with Dundee United, but unfortunately, like, Wraith Rovers weren't really able to take advantage of the fact that Dundee United dropped some points against Big Dunk.
Do you know something? It's funny. I've always, up until this point, I've been very much trying to play it coy and that. I don't know about a title fight. Like Wraith Rovers trying to take on Dundee United. I'm not so sure about that. But then I realised I was starting to sound a wee bit like Dick Campbell. Remember when Ambrose were in that kind of title wrestling match with Kilmarnock, and every week he'd say things like, "Oh, we're just trying to get to 40 points. That's your target. Get to 40 points, stay in the league." It's like, well, Dick, it's January the 7th and you're on 39, so you can probably aim a wee bit higher than staying in the division. But I must admit, see on Saturday, that was the first time that I thought, wait a minute, we can maybe win this league. But then, to be fair, I can kind of see why I haven't thought that, because it lasted about 2 minutes. So Wraith went 1-0 up in like late into injury time in the first half against Airdrie. Didn't really deserve it. Airdrie being the better team in the first half. Regardless, so 1-0 up. Checked my phone, whatever it was, 5-10 minutes into the second half. Dundee United went a goal down. I was like, oh, well now, here we go. Maybe we can win the league. That puts us a point behind Dundee United with a game in hand. With a game in hand. We maybe could do this. I think that sentence had only just went through my brain, and Nikolai Todorov scored a header from a corner kick. And I was like, I goes, right, okay, but United's losing. That gets us a point closer if it ends like this, with a game in hand, so it might be fine. Checked my phone, and Dundee United had equalised. All of this happened in like maybe a 2-minute spell, but I tell you what, those 2 minutes were very, very exciting.
And this is the analysis that everyone signs up for, is what's going through your head as goals going.
But no, ultimately, I think there is, like as it stands right now, there's 3 title fights, and there's a title fight in all 3 lower leagues. I suspect that there won't be one in the championship eventually. I think Wraith might peter out very soon, and I'll come on to why I might change my mind, but we'll see. I even think the League One title fight might peter out at some point. I think League Two, I mean, at the moment there's about 4 teams that could potentially win the league in the kind of the basement tier. I think that one could go the distance, and I think it could be a very, very, very good laugh. But in terms of the championship one, I'm not sure. I don't want to get my hopes up, but B, like logically, and I'm not just saying this, but like I think there's a wee bit of a myth about Dundee United being a big team. Like Dundee United, off the top of my head, must have spent as many seasons, if not more, in the last 10 years in the championship as they have in the Premiership. Like all the time I've watched football, I've always thought Dundee are like a good championship team or a bad Premiership team, and Dundee United have been a decent Premiership team. And now kind of feels like both are about the same. Like they're both good championship teams.
They're both yo-yo clubs.
They both seem to have become yo-yo clubs. However, in terms of if anybody was going to challenge Dundee United this season, it kind of felt like a few things needed to happen. So, like, we weren't sure if Jim Goodwin was any good a manager. Bear in mind the failures that he's had going into this job,
and then the start that he had.
And the start,
and
right,
at the start of the season as well, you started to give you the feels. Oh, good, we've got a Calypso man, we've got a Collapse man again.
He seems to be, so far, based on the first kind of 2 or 3 months, kind of feels like he's just starting to build up his reputation again, and it feels like he knows what he's doing. So that's a bit disappointing. In terms of the players that were already at the club who had been so disappointing last season, so I'm thinking of Tony Watt, Glenn Middleton, for example.
You've not been a Tony Watt man this season. That's something I've noticed.
I haven't been.
Yeah, you've been very much, can everyone calm down? He's not been very good. Can everyone calm down? He's not been very good. That's been a repetitive theme in the times that I've spent with you. And people can hear how riveting the times that we do spend together are.
It's been... He's been slightly better than I thought he might be. And I do think... I spoke in the preview podcast about United, about Tony Watt is very much a confidence player. I'm now starting to wonder if he is I know it's probably like two sides of the same coin. Not necessarily confidence, but just, does he have a smile on his face? Does he enjoy going to training in the morning? Does he enjoy playing on a Saturday? Like, I don't know if he's had too many spells in his career where he plays for a club. Like, I know he played at Celtic, but he wasn't a fixture. He wasn't necessarily playing every week, but just playing for a team that wins every single week. And I do think he is enjoying that. He might have to shuttle out wide when Louis Moult comes on. So, like, he's been okay. He's been better than I thought he might be. Glenn Middleton has been very, very good. So Jim Goodwin seems to have fixed that. The recruitment seems to have been pretty good. Like, on paper, I thought at the start of the season it seemed fine. Then Moult came in. Then Declan Gallagher came in. Again, you're probably needing some of these signers on paper to not quite work. That hasn't happened. They've all worked. Defensively, they're fine. Going forward, there's goals from everywhere. Young players, you thought, well, like Declan Glass, for example. Like, Declan Glass has had several loan spells at lower divisions in the Championship and hasn't looked particularly great. Yes,
he's had his best times were in the lower leagues where everyone thought he looked incredible.
But this season, like, he's done very well. Kai Fotheringham has done very well so far. It's almost impossible to point to any aspect of what's went on at Dundee United this season and think, like, that's not quite worked. So bearing that in mind, like, they don't concede any goals. Like, they barely conceded any goals this season. With that in mind, it's very difficult to see past them for the league. As close as Wraith Rovers are, I am not. Rovers have got a lot of
shock
games
that Wraith Rovers have had such a good start to the season, such a consistent start to the season. But the difference is, obviously, yours is made up of sort of last minute goals.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which I'm not saying as a criticism, but when this happens and you compare the two runs as they are, the one that looks like obviously it's got more staying power is the Dundee United one. One thing I will say for Wraith Rovers, though, is you must be feeling safe as houses in this league in terms of the playoffs, because like, this league's starting to get a bit like the top flight, where it's like, are any of the other teams any use? None of them seem to be able to put any real form. I mean, part of this had a good start to the season as well, but I mean, they're down to one win in the last 5. They're just drawing every week now. Dunfermline did manage to get back into it with their performance against Morton, but again, despite Morton parting like the Red Sea and allowing them to do whatever they wanted for large periods of that game, Dunfermline were lucky to get out of that with 3 points, and they couldn't have had more accommodating opponents. So you must be feeling from Wraith Rovers' side that, like, you're definitely going to be in the playoffs. That's like not under any sort of question.
I mean, even before the season started, when I saw the squad that had been assembled,
Signings, yeah.
I was a wee bit worried about the centre half position. Then Ewan Murray was brought in. I think that was during the League Cup group stage, and at that point I thought, right, defensively we seem reasonably set. It feels like we've signed players that have went. Oh, Byrne came in as well, maybe after that, and it feels like there's a core of the team that have been round the houses in the Championship and won it. Like, they know what it takes to get results and get out of the league. And I think that makes a huge difference. And I don't think it's luck that they've had so many late goals. I think that's a mentality thing. Looking round the squads,
Murray's mentality monsters.
Absolutely. Looking round the squads, I think Partick Thistle would run them close. I think if I was a Partick fan, like, there was this whole thing about the statement that came out about, they might struggle this season. So got a decent squad. If anything, if I was a Partick fan, I'd be a wee bit disappointed at how, I think, they're 9 points behind Dundee United and played the same amount of games. It feels like on paper, certainly, Wraith, Partick are they're the best of the rest. Everybody else, I don't think there's much between them, to be fair. Between the teams that are 4th to 9th, I honestly couldn't place them at this moment in time. There's very little between all of them. However, it does feel like, unless Dundee United are to pick up injuries, like Louis Moult becomes injured, for example, or Declan Gallagher is out for a spell, or something happens, I still think they'll win the league. Wraith and Partick, in some semblance of order, should really be 2nd or 3rd, and then it's anybody from 4th to 9th onwards.
But you make a fair point there about 4th to 9th. So I suppose this takes us on nicely to how are Morton. Yes, like you're saying, at the top of the table. There's not many points in it. But looking at it now, are Morton about to get cut adrift at the bottom of the Championship?
Potentially. I mean, what are they? I haven't checked actually, but they might be sitting on 8 points after
They, they,
11 games.
they're on 8 points. They've got 2 victories. But Inverness Cali being the main problem for them is that Inverness Cali under Duncan Ferguson have picked up a really good form. Like he's really turned them around in a short space of time. Yes, there can be a debate on how long that will last, and I know that there would always be questions based on Duncan Ferguson's previous jobs. That after, I really don't want to get down into this, but I'm going to say it anyway. He's got a bit of a vibe that he might just be a bit of a cheerleader at the side of the park and a
It's Kevin
character.
Keegan.
Yeah, and that can get you somewhere. That
Yep.
and I'm not against that. And it worked really well for him, especially in his interim spells at Everton, because it can be such a galvanizing figure. But we don't know like how much he's actually got as a genuine football manager. But with Morton being so poor, and with Emery having so much credit in the bank due to what happened last season, that could be a real sort of, that could be like a marriage of inconvenience, really, of Morton, like the way that those two things happen at the same time, because it means that they'll probably give Emery more time than they maybe with another manager, and maybe rightly so. But with the galvanizing nature of what Ferguson does, we could end up that when they do eventually pull the trigger on Emery, it could be all said and done by then.
Yeah. I remember saying last season that I thought Morton had one of the poorer squads in the division. Then they brought in Dougie Imrie, and then he started getting a tune out of players. We've kind of mentioned this before, but he started getting a tune out of players that you never thought he could. So Grant Gillespie's like a really good example. Like the fact that he probably only stayed in full-time football because of what Queen's Park were doing in the bottom tier. Then got a deal at Morton, got a wig, and then became like very good. But I don't think I've ever seen. So last season might have been Grant Gillespie's best ever performances at such a high level, and Doug Ermey got that out of him. And there was George Oakley, a player who's never really scored goals in his career, goes to Morton under Imrie, looks like a very good player, and does score goals. Robbie Muirhead last season, I think off the top of my head, might have had his most successful scoring rate ever in his entire career. So there's all these examples of Dougie Imrie. At least that's how it looked. That's how it appeared. Dougie Imrie getting these fantastic performances out of players who've never really done it at that level ever. So we're kind of in this kind of bubble where somebody you don't think is any good signs for Morton, and you're wary of criticising it because you're like, right, well, he's rubbish.
Like
But
Martindale at
Dougie Imrie-
Livingston. It's the exact same sort of thing. It's the exact same
exactly the
sort of
same.
thing. Yeah.
But Dougie Imrie has now, in a very short period of time, appears to have this fantastic ability to get something out of players who it feels like either they've never really performed or they're on a kind of a poor career trajectory, I suppose. But when I was looking at the kind of business that he'd done in the summer, I wasn't entirely sure about Broadfoot. I wasn't entirely sure about Stephen Boyd. Alan Power, I thought might have been okay.
Mm-hmm.
However, none of those signings have went particularly well. And to compound matters, see those players who'd done so well last season, Muirhead, Oakley, Gillespie, they all appear to have reverted back to how poor they were 2 seasons ago. So we're now in a situation where, I mean, they don't seem to be doing. I think they're almost identical, their record at the start of this season as to when Gus McPherson was given the bullet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that Dougie Imrie deserves it, but I'm struggling. Unless he can get more out of these players, unless he can come up with something, I am struggling to see what team in the Championship Morton are going to finish above.
Mm-hmm. And he sort of fundamentally, the big fundamental mistake is, for the little I know, is that last season Morton were really good at pressing. They were really good at harrying. And they would sort of commit men to do that, and they looked like a nightmare to play against. But with the signing of Broadfoot, And even if you take away that Broadfoot's finished as a footballer anyway, even if he was still quite good in his reading and his ability to move, he's so slow that it naturally makes them having to sit back. So it takes away the tactical thing that got them performing so well. That's now been taken away from them. And this is another thing when you're talking about these players who are normally quite weak players, the fact that you can get a tune at them in terms of effort and pressing and harrying, that's normally what you can do with sort of weaker players. And they've taken that ability to do that due to the makeup of the side. So fundamentally, he's not able to do what he done last season that he was able to do with these styles of players. So that makes them like they need to suddenly be deep, having a low block. So it means you have to be very good defensively and organised. And then you also need your players aren't going to be, since you're not pressing, you're not making our team make as many errors. So then you have to actually be creative and you have to actually make chances like that. And you don't have the talent to do it. So he sort of hamstrung himself with signing slow defenders. Never mind, even if it's not Broadfoot, even if it's another player like that, and the style that they're forced to play in, then sort of negates all the sort of positive attributes that they had, and sort of stops them being able to be better than the sum of their parts.
Yeah. And like, you know how often you'll talk about if a team's doing well, you might say something like, whether you're talking about recruitment or whether you're just talking about the squad in general, you might say, aye, the spine of the team's really good. And you'll talk about the keeper, a centre half, a central midfielder, and a striker. And that might be why they're succeeding. And the players round about them can be doing whatever, but you're talking about the spine of a team. It kind of feels like the spine of Morton's team might be what the issue is. So Jamie McDonald signed in the summer, and I thought that was a good signing. I would have been quite happy if Wraith had kept him. However, he missed a wee bit of last season with an elbow injury, and it did feel like last term was maybe his purest in a Rovers jersey. He was a wee bit slow to get down to stuff. This season, it feels like he's been okay, but no better than that. In front of him, we mentioned Broadfoot. I thought Tyler French, that came in on loan from Dundee, was going to be a good signing for them. Most Dundee fans were like, oh, maybe we'd have kept him and gave him some minutes until he was eventually fit and ready to come into the first team. He's been really bad for them. Like, really, really, really poor. Whether it's...
It was a shambles. Watching that Dunfermline game, they were like so far apart. These are like bog standard basics. Where it looked like a dream to play in as a Dunfermline player. Because when it gets like that and it becomes so easy and you're constantly making chances, it makes the rest of the team confident. And then you've got a Dunfermline team who were quite weak at the time. Something that's pinging one touch pass about because they grow into it. So having these gaping holes, having these really poor defence, that has a huge knock-on effect on the confidence of their team. And then that starts having an effect in other parts of the pitch. It's not just simply, it's more than just individual errors when stuff like that happens. It's more, and people always like to say that, but it all has such a knock-on effect to the rest of the team and the confidence of the other team.
Yeah. And they were like last season, they were just like there's a thing when it comes to Morton, certainly last season, where opposition fans would talk about how kind of one-dimensional they were and how difficult Morton were to play and how frustrating they were. And I think Morton fans probably wear that as a kind of badge of honour. But they were nasty and they got in your face. And it wasn't that they were bad to watch, but they made the most of what they had. They did close you down. And they were very, very difficult to play against. They closed you down. They took ages on free kicks. They shut down your free kicks. They took ages on throw-ins. It was a frustrating style of team to watch. This season, they didn't really do any of that. And it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. I mean, obviously, they're locked in with the squad until January. Interesting in terms of they are a kind of fan-led club. And although there's a wee bit of outside financing when it comes to sponsorship, I suppose part of the problem, like in an ideal world, all clubs would be kind of fan-led as class.
With a little bit of money pumped in, that would be the ideal scenario.
But I don't know if they have much more money that can allow them to bring more bodies in January. Maybe they will be able to find it, I don't know. But at this moment in time, it's a struggle to see. I think it's more likely that Morton become detached than anybody else get reeled in towards them at the bottom of the table.
Right, let's go into the championship and let's start at the. I'm Falkirk and Hamilton. I know Hamilton have blinked one first, and that's interesting in terms of that opens up a little gap. But I mean, you're a man who knows it all, Sean. So I was going to ask you more about the playoff run. Looks quite interesting. The clubs in around that look quite interesting because there seems to be a real lot of good form and good sides in that area. So Cove have absolutely spun it round, and I know it's nothing to do with Paul Hartley's signings, and it's the people that comes back, but he is coaching them, so he does have to take some sort of credit. For turning round what looked like they were going to be within, like right in the heart of the relegation battle, but they are absolutely flying now. And obviously they beat Aki's and they sort of beat Queen of the South, and they're beating like sort of they're more than just they're winning big games against good sides at the moment, as well as just picking up results.
I so you're right. I suppose the disappointing thing about League One is, so you're right. It's like Falkirk and Hamilton at the top of the table. I do think Hamilton's charge might peter out eventually. I
Mhm.
just have far more faith in Falkirk than I do Hamilton. Albeit, I think there's probably not that much between the squads. But John Rankin, I'm not so sure. Below that, I think that Cove. I'd be very surprised if Cove don't finish in the top four, so third or fourth. But you're right. I'm not entirely sure it's anything to do with Paul Hartley. Like, it's incredible a manager who started off his career on such a high, and yet now we're kind of thinking to ourselves, if he doesn't do well this season with Cove, like where does he go from here?
Mhm.
And like he still might do well. He still could finish the top four. I suspect they will. I don't think they'll get promoted. Looking at that squad, I think his recruitment is slipshod at best. Like they must have signed 35, 40 players over the last two windows. Very few of them have been a success. And ultimately, the reason why they're doing so well has been a kind of uptick in performances is because Fraser Five is back and Blair Yule's back. And they've been missing for all of this season. So bringing those two back into your team is always going to have a positive impact.
And yeah, and at that level, 5e is like a real top
Oh, of
player.
course.
Still. I mean, I loved Fraser 5e. I loved him when he was at Hibs. I think he's a tremendous player. And for whatever reason, he ended up down there. But just his brain, how quick his thinking is, his skill, and his passing ability. You picture him being able to run games, and I'm no surprised that when a guy like that comes back and it can literally go from we are absolutely shit to winning winning every single match. And as you say, that is not really anything to do with Paul Hartley. I think you say about like worrying about where he goes from here. I don't know how much a chairman or a board would love to look at the fact a guy wants to make 30 signings in two windows. I don't think that's really palatable for most boards in terms of that's definitely not the type of manager we want to bring in here. So, you would be thinking that he would be looking down the barrel of a gun, but he has done it, and Kelty Hearts are, are sort of continuing to pick up. They got a poor result away at Annan, so we had a huge swing, but a bit of a swing at the bottom because Montrose thumped Edinburgh City, with Annan managed to get a sort of unlikely draw against Kelty Hearts. Let's talk about Edinburgh City, Sean. It's what we're all here for.
I I find like the Edinburgh story, even when you go back to like them coming into the league, they've just had a very, very interesting SPFL stay. Always been very interesting. This period of their SPFL tenure might be their most interesting. So obviously, Alan Maybury his services were dispensed. I can understand why, considering the end to last season and the beginning to this. They brought in Michael McIndoe, whose relationship with football, I suppose, and relationship with footballers has been documented in other places in terms of I don't know how well liked he is in certain circles, especially if you're giving him a lot of money and then that vanished.
I would like that personally either.
I wouldn't like it.
Nah,
I'd be really quite annoyed.
uh,
It tells you his career. If you just want to look at what he'd done at Gretna 2008, he kept them up. They had a reasonable season under his stewardship, I suppose, considering how it looked like he wanted to maybe be not on the sidelines, but it kind of feels like he wanted to keep himself on the down low. To then come into SPFL seemed like quite an unusual move,
Mm-hmm.
especially for somebody who didn't want to do any interviews, like with anybody, in-house media, anybody, when it come to Gretna 2008. And now he's starting to do interviews for Edinburgh. And my goodness, goodness.
Well, he wouldn't do interviews for anyone else, but he'll certainly do them for Dave.
Dave.
And he will say his name till the day he dies now. The calling card of the Edinburgh City. That interview I thought was astonishing. And it was like the biggest PR stunt in terms of what a manager can do to try and fluff up the fans that I think I've possibly ever seen. And then I saw that, and I quite liked it, and I don't want to criticize this, but you know the dancing he was doing with the young team and the
Yes.
ultras and all that.
Mhm.
But when I combine it with this interview, this guy is on in terms of he knows he needs to get everyone on side, and it's like the most blatant, obvious move to do that. And he's sort of like making sure that everyone knows what his standards are. Everything. It's all nonsense. It's like all just what. It's exactly what I would do in a blind panic as a manager, because I don't really have anything to actually say. I don't have anything to really analyze anything, and it's very much he's straight into self-preservation mode, in my opinion, in the way he's behaving.
I thought it was a couple of things. So this was his post-match interview after Edinburgh lost 5-1 to Montrose at the weekend. But he, like you're right, so he constantly, almost every sentence, he mentions the interviewer's name.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll say Dave, next sentence, Dave, next sentence, Dave. I was desperate. I was like, because I think like this doesn't last too long. 4 minutes, 3.5 minutes. And I was like, please let one of these questions, let the interviewer say, my name's Derek. Like, I was desperate. I was desperate, like to get the name wrong because he mentioned it so many times.
No, I prefer to be called David.
But as in terms of him, because he essentially threw a lot of players under the bus.
Some of these players you won't be seeing again. There's language like that. I will have to make changes. You have to understand. And ironically uses the word honest very, very regularly.
So that's interesting. So if he's so from everything I've heard about Edinburgh, their budget's tiny. So maybe he knows that he's going to be moving players on, and he's allowed to make additions to the squad in January. In which case, not fair enough. But if he knows who he wants to move on, and those are kind of pointed comments about certain players in the squad, then maybe that might work. However, if he's going to be working with the bulk of the squad for the rest of the season, and he's already making pointed comments about them, I'm not so sure. I know it's like Kieran McDonald left, so we're recording this on a Thursday. I think McDonald left earlier today, which I'm surprised at, because like, I thought he was very good at Wraith a couple of years ago. Felt like a good signing on paper. I mean, I say it was a good signing because he's a good fullback. For whatever reason, it hasn't worked out for him. But already he's starting to shape his squad by moving players on. So perhaps one of the players who he was alluding to in that interview was McDonald, who's now left the club. But I don't know how can I express this in a way that isn't slagging him off. I just thought it was a really odd. Like I don't know if I've seen too many examples of this kind of.
Certainly not at this level. Claiming that the goals that they lost will never happen again under my watch, ever. And screaming about a winning mentality for a team that's rock bottom and has got no money to change and has been losing all the time. As I said, it just felt like he's watched what sort of guys like Sam Allardyce or something would say when they come in at a club, and he's sort of, I'm going to use that and put that across, and everyone's going to know that I've got really, really high standards. to me, it all. Maybe I shouldn't be talking this, but I don't know. This is just how I talk. Is it seemed very, very self-serving and making sure everyone knows that I've got standards, but it's just like, to me, it'll almost guarantee become across as hollow words in about a month's time. And it just seemed like the most obvious way to get fans on side, and fans want to believe it. They want to believe the standards at a part-time team are through the roof and everyone's fit. It's just probably not the case. And it just felt like it was as he said, a throwing everyone under the bus sort of move, and making sure that everyone knows that he wants what's best for Edinburgh, and he is the best for Edinburgh. And any problems that will come is because people aren't trying.
It's interesting what you said about like they won't be like whatever it was conceding goals like that under his watch or whatever. Because I'd read, in fairness, I didn't see the interview, so forgive me if this is incorrect. But I read that after the Annan game, which they won 3-2, he said that nobody will be turning up at the Capitol and getting a kind of soft touch kind of thing. That was the week before, and then 7 days later they lose 5-1 at home to Montrose. So already some of his claims are not really holding much water.
Yeah, because that's what I see. But they come across, they are just like the most bold, brash claims you could possibly do. And like I said, it's like what a big name manager would speak like, who has a back catalogue that you can go, right, I'm behind him. If I'm a player, I'm rolling my eyes at that straight away.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he's disingenuous. I'm not saying anything like that. I just think that, mate, I just got, my gut instinct would be that he's using this stuff because he doesn't actually have the technical abilities of a manager that to do it. So he's already going to just buff up the easiest fans, the fans that want to believe all this type of chat, believe that this is how it all works, and he'll get them on side, and that can get him surviving for the longest length of time that he can. That's just why there's no like sort of analysis in it at all. And I don't know, again, maybe I'm being really unfair here, but that is just exactly what I thought the second I watched that interview.
I suppose it's interesting looking at the comments about the interview online, because Edinburgh fans online, and I appreciate that doesn't mean there's like hundreds of comments, but from what I've seen, that sounds totally disrespectful. I didn't mean it that way, but from what I've seen, Edinburgh fans in general online actually quite liked it and thought it was okay, and thought that kind of straight talk felt good, and maybe like that kind of honesty is what the players needed, and also a bit of it can't get any worse. So why not have a kind of change of approach? What I would say, the
Early days for that change of approach. Where did he go from
Yes.
here? Where do you go? What's the next thing you say?
The other aspect I would say is that the non-Edinburgh fans who have watched it, their feelings and thoughts seem to be, what a knob.
And that's their words, not ours.
I certainly not my words. Maybe my thoughts.
I very much enjoyed when he was saying, "Congratulations to Montrose today." So what? Tomorrow, that's not congratulations for the winning 5-1. What do you mean? That's set in stone. Like, you can't change that. It's congratulations for that result. Full stop. The result doesn't change tomorrow. But I suppose very, 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 very quickly, Shaughan picking up a draw to take the 3 points clear of the bottom, and putting them 4 points behind Queen of the South, who, with Marvin Bartley, he's doing 1-1 when we obviously got the win against Annan, which probably wasn't really deserved. Then Cove beat him. And then he's went and got a draw at Falkirk. So that seems a bit all over the place in terms of where that team is. But he is absolutely under pressure. Obviously, being a full-time team in this league, they should be doing better. But do you believe that Annan have it in them? If we're taking, I'm going to assume, even you don't have to say it, that you think Edinburgh are gone. So do you think Annan have got what it takes to reel Queen of the South? I know, I think Queen of the South, as I say, are going to be able to, when the injuries come back, maybe get themselves up the league and make a run at the playoffs where they should be.
If anybody is going to get reeled in, I think it might be Stirling Albion.
Okay.
Like, they started the season so well, so positively, brilliant League Cup campaign, started the season really strongly, but they were kind of grinding out wins, they were keeping clean sheets, like they're winning games 1-0, apart from when they went to St Johnstone, obviously, and scored hunters. But they now can't keep clean sheets. So they seem to get reeled in. I was impressed with Queen of South at the weekend against Falkirk. They probably should have won the game. What I would say about Falkirk is, as much as I expect them to win the league, I thought it was very, very funny that ex-Falkirk TV Supremo, Lewis Connolly, who has endured whatever it was, 4 or 5 years of abject misery, reporting on Falkirk week in, week out, barely missing a game. He left in the summer, and immediately Falkirk picked up.
What are you insinuating here?
Falkirk then put in their worst performance of the season on Saturday against Queen of South. Well, maybe could have been 2 goals up until Queen of South equalised, and then they kind of rode their luck, and maybe Queen of South were the better team over the piece for that 90 minutes. When I pressed play on the Falkirk TV highlights, I could not believe it was Lewis Connolly that was that he was back. I don't know why he was back. I don't know what's happened, but I now I'm starting to see that this man is just a curse. So he has been probably responsible, actually, wholly responsible for Falkirk's dreadfulness over the last 4 or 5 years. Why he returned to Falkirk? Like, maybe he had a job on a farm and all the crops failed, and the reason he had to get a job on the farm was because he invested heavily in shares in hand wash at the end of the pandemic. He lost all of his money. It just feels like that poor Lewis, God bless him. God bless him, because he's an honest, hard-working guy, but that man is a curse. And if Hamilton are to sustain this title challenge, Lewis Connolly will need to continue in the Falkirk TV hot seat.
Yeah, so you were very, very careful with your words with Michael McIndoe, but this poor guy gets both barrels and referred to it as a curse.
I'm just saying what I see. Just saying what I see, Tony.
There's mounting evidence. But okay, right, Shaughan, let's get to our last league. Let's go to bloody League 2, where I suppose I'm going to have to just ask the question, Shaughan, before we get down the bottom, which is where the interest really is. When do we call Spartans the real deal?
Oh, well, now that's quite an interesting question, because see the other examples we have of teams coming up from the Lowland League and retaining the bulk of their squad, it's never went very well. Like Edinburgh went down that route. They really struggled to start with. Bonnyrigg last season pretty much went with the same squad that had won the Lowland League. They struggled. Spartans haven't kind of had those issues, even though the vast majority of their squad is the same team that won the Lowland League. Yes, they've added to it in terms of, so certainly Ayrton Sonker is coming at centre half. That kind of meat and potatoes, as Telfer would describe him, centre half. James Craigan admittedly kind of elevates them to a degree, but ultimately that's still the same team that won the Lowland League. So whether it's because they were just a very, very, very good Lowland League team, or maybe the quality in League 2 this season maybe isn't quite what it was, I'm not sure.
That's what I was going to ask you, because like with the Scottish Cup results, some of them being extremely one-sided, and I know that you normally, and I normally agree with you when the argument about how there is a gap between the SPFL and the Lowland in the Highland League, but this season, either way, the gap's being made smaller due to the better teams from the Lowland League, or that the League 2 teams are getting worse. There's a lot of evidence now looking that they are getting a lot closer together.
Yeah, maybe. Certainly in terms of money.
And maybe that's because investment, because there's an open door now. There's a way of actually making it through. Means that the lower league teams are sort of investing more money. There being a carrot's huge for players as well. Right, you're not just playing to win a league. You're playing to move into to professional football.
I think if you look back, let's say go back 10 years, maybe not quite as much as that. In terms of if you're looking at a non-league sides, non-league sides, but non-SPFL sides that have spent money, it's probably been exclusively Highland League teams. But that isn't the case now. So you've got West of Scotland League teams, you've got Lowland League teams spend money. Like East Kilbride, they might deny the fact that they spend money, but they absolutely are. But regardless, like this Spartans team is doing very, very well. And I think of the 4 teams that are up there at the moment, so they all have a lot going for them in terms of Peterhead, in terms of Dumbarton, in terms of Spartans, in terms of Steny. Of the 4, and maybe it's just because I know the least about them, like I know the least about the players, like Jamie Dishington, I've seen a lot of this season. I think he's very good. Reece Armstrong looks very good, kind of middle of the park. I know about Craig and Cammy Russell seems fine in the middle of the park. So certainly the midfield seems very as good as anybody, I suppose. But I probably know the least amount them, at least about them in terms of those top 4. So maybe I'm wrong. I expect them to kind of drift away, but maybe that's just because I know more about Peterhead, Dumbarton, and Steny. But regardless, it doesn't feel like there's too much between those teams. So there's 4 there at the moment, maybe separated by 4 points, maybe. And I do think I've went on about maybe the championship title. No entirely sure how long that will go. I think Falkirk might eventually pull away. This one, in terms of League Two, that's the one that could potentially go the distance. And I do think it might not necessarily be between 2 teams. I think it could be multiple teams involved, which hopefully would be the case because it's just class.
Because the other leagues, as you say, there's including maybe even the top flight. There's a lot like some you feel like there's always this ebb and feeling that someone's going to pull away, and we
Yeah.
need a league where there's a proper sort of title race. And I would say this is looking the most likely if Dumbarton are able to play on that pitch for much longer. But let's go quickly to the bottom of the league where we've had so Elgin and Clyde have sort of both replaced their managers in recent times. Even though like Barry Smith has been at Elgin for a fair whack of time now, but Clyde have Chris Miller, who's sort of the interim. I was good. I was really interested in this. So he was playing. I was doing my research. So he was playing at Morton, and he's still a player at Morton, and he's getting interim role at Clyde.
Are you sure?
It's just that's the way it looked on sort of your Wikipedia's that type of look that it still said that he was still playing for Morton. He's interim manager for Clyde at the moment. And that sounded silly. And I've outed myself as not knowing very much because I needed to ask a question, but I just wanted to know.
I thought
He can't be on loan as the manager.
I thought he left Morton about 2 years ago.
This is just what it says on these various sites. I don't know if they're very good. I don't know. I'm just asking. I'm blown away. Current team. It says current team, Greenock Morton. And then above it, it's saying manager. So it knows that he's the manager of Clyde because it says interim manager of Clyde. But current team, it says Greenock Morton. And I was flabbergasted.
Maybe Wikipedia is right. I'm not so sure. I think he'd left Morton, but I could be totally wrong.
Because that's some setup on loan to be manager. Can I borrow your midfielder?
I think the bottom of League Two it might be the dreckiest we've seen in a while. And I know Clyde have decided to do something about it in terms of Brian McLean no longer being the manager, and Elgin have decided to do something about it by bringing in Barry Smith. My goodness, good luck with that. And it might be that those two are the teams that kind of circle the drain in that league for the remainder of the season. It's a team above that I find quite interesting. I mean, all 3 are interesting, but bear in mind when we done the preview pod, myself, Telfer, who generally can be very, very wrong to be fair, but we fancied Fulford to have a decent season. They've done very well in the League Cup. I'm always
the manager you think was almost managing beneath himself, possibly?
Aye, probably. Well, you could argue that. I think certainly
you know,
could argue that.
you get players that are good for that level. You'd
Mhm.
be edging towards Ray McKinnon is good manager for that level. That's how an outsider would think due to where he's managed.
Absolutely, and I wonder, and I'm not saying it had a disruptive effect on his summer because he still recruited players. I felt they had an okay squad on paper, but there was still. I mean, bear in mind he went down to Forest Green with the intention to be Duncan Ferguson's assistant manager, then had to not necessarily come back up with his kind of tail between his legs, but let's face it, he was distracted. Now he's come back up. I have no doubt he's now giving the Forfar job his full attention. But the fact that they are only just above Elgin and Clyde, that we have went on about how lamentable they are,
Yeah.
but they're only a win or two behind Forfar. I think that McKinnon is in a very, very difficult situation. Now Forfar play Clyde this weekend, and I suspect a defeat would cost him his job. I'd be amazed if Clyde beat them. I'd be amazed if McKinnon is kept on it at Forfar because nothing, absolutely nothing, other than that League Cup section, and who cares? Nothing has went right for Forfar this season, and it feels like they're in a. It feels like he is a really. I don't know. I don't know if it's right to say this. I just think he is potentially quite a negative influence on Station Park.
Oof. Strong words. I mean, but where would you? I mean, you're mentioning Paul Hartley earlier. Where would he go? Where would Ray McKinnon go off the back of this?
I think he may have to drop down out of the SPFL.
Because you're talking like that's a mega fall from grace over a
Yeah,
few years.
I mean, bear in mind, so like done very well at Brecon, done very well at Wraith Rovers. I mean, I thought he was great at Wraith Rovers. What I would say is, in terms of speaking to people at the club, that they put up with Ray McKinnon because of the results. Like they didn't particularly find his. I don't know how popular he was at Starts Park, other than the results. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, aye, so they weren't necessarily disappointed to see the back of him, but were aware that maybe results would go backwards.
So we're talking. So you're saying Clyde could get Ray McKinnon the bullet, and then he will no longer be managing in a professional league.
I
what we're saying?
wouldn't if Clyde beat Forfar at the weekend, then I would be amazed if Ray McKinnon is kept on at Forfar and has another game in him. Yes.
Wow, big words, and I think that is a good place to finish this evening, Shaughan. I have enjoyed my Whistle Tops tour around the lower leagues. I feel I have learned. I feel I've garnered things, and you have inspired me to watch the Friday night game and maybe keep an eye on these results closer. But I will not run anyone over in your name.
I will be cheering on Dunfermline this Friday, and I don't see that very often.
But why would you be doing that?
Because Wraith Rovers are in a title race.
Oh, yeah,
so I need Dunfermline to beat Dundee United.
I'd love it if it came round and they beat them and they eventually get above you. That would be a right laugh. That would be. But life is shit, Shaughan, and you just have to accept that. And as a Hibs fan in recent times, that is all I've been going through. So I'll be going to Easter Road at the weekend to watch Hibs draw another match 2-2. So I hope you all enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, we'll have Telfer and Shaughan back together with the Lower Leagues podcast very soon. But until then, enjoy your football, but do it safely, so they say. And say goodbye, Shaughan.
Goodbye.